This just occurred this past November. A close friend and I were on fall break from college and decided to go to an Odessa concert in downtown Chicago. We grew up in the suburbs, so going to Chicago to have fun was common for us. Anyways, we had a great time at the concert and decided to Uber home since we weren't close to the train station. My friend told me Uber wasn't working for him at the moment, so I called the Uber. But this was literally my first time ever calling one, and I accidentally called an Uber pool not knowing what it was. My friend saw that and said, it really doesn't matter. The driver picks us up from right outside the concert venue. There were a lot of intoxicated people around, as one could imagine post-Odessa show, but we were pretty sober, as all we did was smoke some weed, which we were used to. We get in the car and everything is going normal, but we didn't notice the direction the driver was taking as we were wrapped up in talking about the show. Turns out, the driver was going to the south side of Chicago, which we realized after some time by looking at maps. Our suburb was exactly the opposite direction of this lengthy drive down south. We decided to attribute this to the fact that it was an Uber pool and shrugged it off, until we picked up this next passenger. To be honest, this girl scared us. I don't like to judge people, but she scared us just by looks and how she talked. Once the girl got in, we asked the driver where we were going first, to which he stopped responding. The next thing I know, my phone lit up and said that the Uber trip had been cancelled, and for this duration of the ride, Uber had no record of me being in the car. I asked the driver what the deal was, and he didn't answer. The girl and the driver 100% knew each other, as they were calling each other nicknames now. The girl was being weird, and seemed to be doing some hand signals to him. Then we proceeded to drive further south to this neighborhood, the sketchiest neighborhood I've ever seen. I didn't realize neighborhoods like this even existed. Every house was completely wrecked. There were no street signs on most streets. Most streetlights were out or flickering. Homeless people were lying on the sidewalks, and there were beat-down warehouses and alleys. This was by far the scariest area I had ever been in. No one who cared would hear a scream in this place. Once we started seeing all of this, our hearts dropped because the driver would still not respond to anything we said. My friend then looks over to me and whispers, "We need to get the fuck out of here." To which I reply, "Dude, look where we are." So we stayed in the car. Then we get driven down this alley behind a warehouse where the streets ended and there were just fields beyond it. The driver is going down this alley at about 2 miles an hour, but keeps going slowly. The girl and Uber driver were clearly discussing something serious, but we couldn't make it out since they were mostly using signals. At that time, our hearts sank even more, and we literally both thought we were going to be killed in this alley, or at best someone was going to get in the car and rob us. He stopped, the doors unlocked, and I was in complete shock with a pale face, when all of a sudden my friend says, "Hey, I'm completely sober and I'm about to call 911. I'm assuming the driver was waiting around the concert to pick up some wasted people to allow this to happen, but we were both pretty sober. He was serious about it. He had already dialed 911 on his phone. The Uber driver looks back at us in shock after he sees 911 dialed, and my friend's finger about to push call. He looks at the girl, and the girl is in shock too. She nods her head no and gets out of the car. The driver then drives out of the neighborhood and onto the highway towards our suburb. All of a sudden, my Uber app gave me a notification saying we were now on a ride. All of a sudden, the driver starts talking to us again, but he wasn't giving us any answers, just saying that he was driving us home. We were asking what the fuck happened, and he just wouldn't answer anything. He would answer about where we were going, but nothing about what had just happened. We got home safely and reported the Uber driver for this ride, because it was obviously messed up. We think that the Uber driver was trying to wait for wasted people to call a pool, so he could get away with this, but realized we were too big of a risk when it came time to do what they were going to do. We've accepted that we were part of some mugging scheme, and got lucky we decided not to get drunk at the concert. We had anxiety for weeks after this, but we now know just how sketchy some areas can be, and how to be more safe in Chicago, by not calling an Uber pool outside a concert or bar. It's so weird to me that people can live this sketchy of lives and do this to people, but I guess it was kind of eye-opening. I met a guy this weekend. We were at the same restaurant. He was with a wedding party, and I was with family, not connected to the wedding or couple in any way. We just happened to be at the same restaurant where the wedding reception was being hosted. He was polite and respectful, and offered me his number. I took it and decided to text him. We texted for a day or so, and then made arrangements to get together for coffee. We got together in the middle of the day at a public place. I drove myself. I texted a friend and told her where I'd be and the guy's name. I figured I was being overly cautious. The first 3/4 of the conversation was normal enough. We talked about work, schooling, basketball, and the like. It turned out he was a lot younger than I thought he was. He's 22 and I'm 35. He went from being kind of shy and very respectful to telling me a story about how the night after the wedding he came home and people were going crazy. I asked what he meant, and he elaborated to tell me that he had walked into his bedroom and lesbian girls I know were having sex on my bed, but he was a gentleman and didn't stick around to watch. He then locked eyes with me and asked, "Have you ever been in that kind of situation before?" "Well, I've lived in apartments, so I guess I've heard people sometimes." He pushed even further. "No, but have you ever walked in on something like that?" I told him no, and that it was a weird story to tell someone you've just met, and tried to change the subject. He talked about himself a lot. He did ask me some questions, but would interrupt me when I tried to answer, and continue to talk about himself. Something felt odd. He wasn't acting like the night I first met him. He leaned in over the table a lot, and made a noticeable effort to lock eyes with me. I like eye contact, but it felt more like a stare down after a while. I could feel myself moving away the further he leaned in. He started to talk about how he used to pick up girls, but he doesn't do that anymore, because he realized that the girls he picked up at the bars were probably whores who went there every weekend. Then he wanted to know if I drank, smoked, did drugs, did I ever party, where did I party, where did I like to go out, and did I see other men. Almost no pauses, one question immediately after the other. We talked for a few minutes more, and he looked at his phone and said, "The game I wanted to watch is going to start soon. Do you want to get out of here?" Turns out there was a basketball game on, and he wanted me to come back to his place to watch it. I said no thanks, said we'd just met and I wasn't comfortable with that, but maybe we could talk again soon. His face sort of changed and he said, "I'm sorry, but I really thought you were going to come back with me." I told him I wasn't sure how he'd gotten that impression. I hadn't at any point said that I would do that. He kept begging me to come back to his place, and I kept saying no. He kept asking me why not, and I kept telling him that I had just met him and wasn't comfortable doing so. He finally said, "Fine, let's go to the park then." Red flags and alarm bells were going off, so I said no thanks, not interested. He basically begged some more, and said he'd even skip the game if I wanted him to. I told him no and to just go home. We had just met for coffee. It's not a big deal if we can't take it further today. He then asked me to take a walk in the field behind the coffee shop, looked at the ground and literally said, "I'll do anything you want, just don't leave." I said again that I wasn't going to go anywhere else with him that day, to please just respect that and we'd talk again later. I got into my car, and as he was pulling away, he yelled out his car window at me. "I'm doing everything I can to change your mind. Come over." I sat and watched him leave because things just felt weird. I drove home and my phone was blowing up the whole time. He was texting and calling non-stop, saying he was home and that I should come over. Then he sent me a video of himself watching basketball on his couch alone. He started sending me messages saying he could see a future with me, that I was the most beautiful woman he's ever met, that it was horrible for such a beautiful woman to be single, and that he liked our chances to be together. The entire coffee date was about 40 minutes total. He continues to ask me to come over. I said I was happy to meet him for coffee, but I had told him I wasn't going to come before I left, and I wasn't going to go back on what I had said. Then the calls really started. 7:55, 8 o'clock, 8:02, 8:07, 8:11. He called over and over for the next several hours. I texted him after the first couple of calls. He had sent me yet another text saying how beautiful and perfect I was, and that he wanted to date and travel together. All I could think to say was, "I'm sorry. I don't feel the same way about you that you seem to feel about me. I wish you well. Take care." He said that he didn't understand. Did that mean that I didn't want to see him again? I replied, trying to be a little clearer. "I'm sorry for not being so upfront. No, I don't want to see you again. I'm sorry. I wish you well, and goodbye." The calls and texts kept coming. I told him one time to please stop. I had to turn off my phone, it kept vibrating so much. All of the texts were about, "What did I do wrong? Why won't you tell me so I can fix it and make this work between us? I really am a great guy and I like you so much. You owe it to me to tell me. If you tell me, then I'll stop bothering you, but you have to tell me." I blocked his number, but my phone still logs call attempts from blocked numbers, so I could see that he was still calling all night until 2 a.m. He called a few more times this morning, and again this afternoon. I called the phone company this morning to check, and turns out he had sent me over 200 text messages in that one day. That was the tipping point, and I decided to go to the police station and at least talk to them and possibly report it as suspicious behavior or maybe harassment. All I had was his first name, which I'm pretty sure was a nickname, and also a phone number. The cops were really nice and took down all the info. He had never threatened me, but I had told him to stop and he wouldn't. They said that was enough to be concerned. I showed them the text and the timing of his calls, and they told me it definitely looked like obsessive and unstable behavior, and that it was good I came in, even just to put it on record in case things got worse. I felt bad for even going there, like I was stupid to have gone to meet him, but I've been on lots of coffee dates and no one has ever done this kind of thing before. After I left the station, I got home and checked my phone. I had 3 voicemails from unknown numbers, and they were all him pleading for me to call him and tell him how to make it right. He doesn't understand why I blocked him. Did he message me too much? Was it a bad move to call me 80 times in a night? Why wouldn't I just talk to him? I recorded the voicemails and sent them in to police, along with screenshots of the messages and logs from my phone company. Now I'm low-key terrified of what will happen next. Will the cops call him? If they do, will it make him mad? I'm pretty sure I didn't tell him anything about what area of the city I live in or where I work, and all he had was my phone number. I considered changing my cell number, but I'm also hoping that he'll get to the point after a few days of silence and give up. Update: May 22nd, 2018. He's been texting and calling me from random numbers all day. I've been taking screenshots and sending them in to the police with my report number. It's been a long, exhausting day. I really want to change my number, but he keeps sending me things, and I feel like it might be helpful to the police to figure out who he actually is. I've informed my family, friends, employer, cell phone provider, and building caretaker about this crazy pants, and given everyone a description of him. I went out and bought 100 plus decibel alarms for the windows and doors in my apartment, and installed them. I'm in Canada, so I can't legally carry mace, but I'm looking at alternatives. Today, he wrote me a really long-winded message, asking for another chance and begging forgiveness. He said he was just overly excited to meet such a beautiful and well-endowed woman, and that he needed just one chance to show his true worth. Pleading and pleading for me to reply and come meet him, and he even signed his name at the bottom. I had heard it slightly wrong and didn't have the right spelling in my phone. I went to Facebook and found his profile where he has 0 security settings. He's not friends with anyone I know. I copied that link and sent it off to the cops. I'm torn between hoping they can talk some sense into him and being terrified the police will confront him and that it'll become even crazier. Is it worth it? I keep thinking. All he has is my number. Update, May 28, 2018. The last contact I had from him was 4-ish days ago, when he called me at 12:56 a.m. on the 24th. He had been texting me from the same number a few days earlier, when he sent me the charming message about my being so well endowed, so I'm pretty sure it was him. I'm admittedly feeling a little burnt out. I'm taking tomorrow off work to try and chill out. This has been a lot to handle along with work and life in general. I haven't really heard from the cops. I've gotten back a couple confirmations that they've added my screen caps and voicemail recordings to the file, but nothing else. He hasn't been really threatening me, and his enthusiasm seems to be dying down, so I doubt I'll hear much unless things change. Here's to hoping there aren't any reasons for the police to become more involved than just saying thanks for the info. I blocked him on Facebook and hidden all my profile pics. I haven't gotten any friend requests on any of my social media. I'm being cautious when I go out. The alarms are helping as well. At least if this dumb kid managed to figure out where I live and tried to get in, I would hear something and be able to get the fuck out. I stashed a hammer between my headboard and mattress as well. It feels gross every time I get into the bed and hear it tap lightly against the wall, but I'm glad it's still there. Thanks for all the concern. I'm safe and things are finally calming down. A few months back, my girlfriend and I were bored hanging around the house and spontaneously decided to go for a hike. We don't go hiking often, but the idea appealed to both of us, and even though there was only about an hour left of light, we figured we had enough time to go enjoy a hike before it got too dark. We quickly fill up our water bottles and put on the best walking shoes we had, and we're out the door driving up into the mountains. Around my area, there are many hiking trails, with the variety of trails increasing as you go up into the mountains. We tended to stay around the base of the mountains in the occasional case of us hiking, where most people would still be walking. We wanted to change things up though, and progressed further up into the mountain road to a trail a friend of mine had mentioned before. We kept in mind our time, and figured that we could hike for a bit and simply enjoy the new environment for us, and finish up before it was too late. We arrived at the trailhead, and see that there were no cars left along the road where the trail commences, but didn't think much of it due to the time. We still had a good 45 minutes until dark, so we continued on. We started walking down a fairly steep hill that then recoups the elevation at the bottom with an equally steep hill that you have to ascend. We reached the top, and then it's smooth sailing from there. We see a lone coyote off the trail a few ways off, and some rabbits. I made a quip about how those rabbits might need to be careful with that coyote lurking around. She playfully hit me for that one. Approximately less than a mile onto the trail, we see a large fallen tree that made a bridge over a dried riverbed, and decided to take a rest, climb around it, and take some pictures. We were there for about 10 minutes, and then resume hiking. We continue on the trail for a short distance, until she hears a rustle in the trees behind us. We stop, mildly spooked due to the assumed size of whatever made that rustling, but continue on briefly before she decides she's done and that we need to head back. It's twilight now, so I agree with her, and we turn around to head back to the car. When we made it back to the fallen tree, my shoe had become untied, so I used the trunk to fix my shoelaces, and looked behind us for the first time on the hike. It was uncharacteristic for me, but hey, I was having fun. Why be paranoid? I see a person dressed entirely in black, with their hood on that was a significant distance behind us, walking at a slow, even pace. It wasn't necessarily something out of the ordinary. So what if they're wearing black with their hood on? I wear black most of the time and it's cold out. I shouldn't make assumptions. This does trigger me to be more alert, however, and I inform my girlfriend of this person's presence. It's dusk now. We continue at an intentionally faster pace and go through a winding section of the trail, and I lose sight of the person. When we come around the final bend of the section, I figure they're far behind us and that there's nothing to worry about. Sooner than later, the person is behind us again, but much closer. Probably 50 feet in comparison to 100 feet before, and we had increased our speed. This alarmed us. We briskly walk around the other bend, and as soon as we come around it, we book it. It seemed to be a natural reaction on both our parts, as we just started running without a word said to initiate it. We're nearing the trailhead now, with only the hills to deal with. We catch our breaths for a moment, and I turn around again. I see the person seemingly halt a sprint upon noticing me looking back, as if they were trying to uphold the illusion of simply walking. At this point, I shout "Go!" and we sprint down the hill. What little light was left struggled to make its way through the dense trees surrounding us, and the steep hill proved challenging to run down without a clear path to be seen. We both stumbled down the hill, almost falling multiple times and slamming our feet onto rocks and loose brush, but we didn't fall, and we didn't look behind us. We make it to the bottom, but must continue up the initial hill, and then we will have made it out. We persevere up the incline and make it back to our car. I briefly breathe in relief as I start my car, heart pounding and adrenaline racing. As I reverse onto the road, the person emerges at the trailhead, apparently breathing heavily. We finally get a glimpse of him. His hood has fallen off of his head, exposing his pale complexion and dead eyes that were only illuminated by a single lantern at the start of the trail. He was holding something in his hand, but it was too dark to see, and I wasn't interested in sticking around to make out the object. I shift into drive and accelerate as fast as my car could muster, leaving it behind in the dust on the empty side of the road. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. I have a little bit of an update here for you guys. I recently started streaming a little bit on Twitch. I don't know if you guys are interested in just hanging out and seeing a bit of gameplay of maybe Monster Hunter or some games like that, maybe a few horror games, but I'll leave a link to my Twitch in the description of the video below. As always, if you guys like the video, please leave a comment or perhaps like or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you'd like to message me, or you'd like to send in a story for me to read, or you have a suggestion for a story I should read, the links to all of my social media will be in the description of the video below as well. This includes my Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, and now, of course, my Twitch account. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible, but please guys be patient, because I do get a lot of messages, so if I don't respond to you right away within like a week or two, just be a little patient. I'll get to it as soon as I can. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the description of the email or message what the name of the story is, what the category of the story is, and how you would like to be credited in the video that the story appears in. If you guys are curious about the music used in this video, links to the music and the order in which the music appears will always be in the description below the video, so you can go ahead and check that out there. Last but not least, if you guys do enjoy my content, please take a look at my Patreon, and if you feel so inclined, maybe donate like $1 or something. Every little bit helps. It'll never be necessary, but of course, it's always an option if you guys would like to support the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.